third-wave feminism. However, this same book, which is banned from many US universities because it contains some graphic images of sexual violence. From opening government, we regret that for two key reasons which I'll explain in this speech. First of all, why it hurts the competition of ideas, and therefore the purpose of universities and academic discourse as a whole, but specifically, secondly, why safe spaces have done nothing but only hurt the most vulnerable even more and put them on the back foot. Before I explain those two key ideas, let's be very clear what we stand for in this debate. We regret the rise of safe spaces in terms of banning certain images, in terms of banning speakers. What are prominent examples of this? For example, on a specific Oxford college banning a speaker from coming to speak at an opening evening because he, for himself, was proposing abortion and thought that it was legitimate. Because they deemed that idea offensive, they banned him from coming in the first place. Let's make one thing also extremely clear in this debate. Safe spaces do not generally influence the laws of hate speech. For example, we're not going to discuss those specific laws on speech. We're going to not take a position on that. We need to discuss in this debate whether in and of itself safe spaces are a good thing or not. So first point, why does this hurt academic discourse? And I want to make very clear from the start why we actually care about this point in the first place. We think the role of university is to provide education and seek answers to the most difficult questions, to obtain knowledge. First of all, because it has a duty to the individuals it teaches and to general society, because those give extensive amounts of support and money to the university in order to fulfill that very duty. But second of all, on a broader level, we think in general society benefits from the helpful understanding of certain specific issues, because that means society can move forward and be more progressive in general. So, why is that specifically damaged? When you create a safe space, you don't engage with the idea itself. You don't, for example, allow the speaker who is in favor of abortion to come to your college, but you don't allow them in the first place. So you don't get discourse on that specific issue. We think, therefore, it hurts the road that we have in seeking truth in two key ways. First of all, your own assumptions are less challenged in many instances. Why is that problematic? Because when your own assumptions are challenged, you're forced to think more critically about why you have those certain assumptions and why you hold a certain belief. In those instances, it forces you to improve your own thinking about those ideas, because you need to reevaluate why you exactly think that. We think you become lazy when it doesn't happen, and therefore less likely to think critically about why you hold those thoughts and if those are true in the first place. And we specifically need extreme ideas to challenge your views. Why? Because those challenge the very fundamental assumptions that you have, for example, about a certain idea. So, for example, we think without stream speakers, you just get an echo chamber of people, for example, discussing a certain social movement like feminism, and whether or not in and of its certain niche things, but never questioning why in and of itself that might be a good thing or not. We think it's important to critically assess even the most extreme thoughts. But second of all, there can be merit in offensive ideas. So, for example, Clockwork Orange was enormously important in furthering the feminist discourse in the third-wave feminism. But it wasn't, for example, engaged with many people because it contained still graphic images. For example, also because there might be some ideas about why, for example, a certain idea might be a good thing, because people find that idea in and of itself offensive, they don't engage with it. That means you don't obtain the knowledge and information simply on Facebook because people find it offensive. You lose, therefore, that knowledge, therefore you hurt the role of universities. But they're obviously going to say in this debate, the most vulnerable are maybe more important. So not only have I already given you a reason why we care about academic discourse in general, here are 4 reasons why you make it worse for the most vulnerable in this second point. First of all, people become more aggressive outside of safe spaces. Because when there's silence in the safe space of the university, they feel extremely frustrated for not being able to let their voice out in general. That means the hurtful comments that they care about in this debate are going to be made in other places. Note that a safe space can't regulate the entire world, or even in not everything at university. You can still say something in the hallway, and if it's not in the open forum. And it can also happen outside of the university, in media, for example. You can't forever hide for a safe space. You're going to be exposed to those hurtful ideas, and it's going to happen more at the point where the people who make those comments feel frustrated and going to be more aggressive. Second of all, it hurts your ability to persuade people and change their minds in many instances. So I already given you some explanation why it has a chilling effect, but you don't have a discussion, or people are afraid to have that discussion in the first place because they believe, it potentially might fall under the ban, for example, of a safe space. Possibly something might be said in many instances. What does that mean? It only affirms the views of those who are offensive to others. They are right. They believe that they're right because people are not engaging with them. Therefore, implicitly, you're saying you are right. We're afraid to engage with you on face in many instances. What does that mean? That means that you only further affirm their views in many instances. What do you got in the Orson class? You actually had a chance in an open discussion where you possibly can persuade them and say to them, for example, well, we think you're wrong for this and this and this reason. That actually has a chance to persuade them and change their mind. You don't get that chance when you silence them and only get a safe space. Further of all, we think it's incredibly important that you, for example, get people who come out in support of the most vulnerable. So when you have a discussion, you get a platform on people who you previously didn't know or previously didn't know were in support of you that can come out and say, actually, I think that idea is helpful. I think we should care, for example, about the most vulnerable. That is incredibly important to people to know that there are people at their university who support them, who actually, that makes them feel less vulnerable in many instances. And you only get those people who you don't know to come out when you have an open forum when everyone can participate. Before I talk about general backlash, second half.
Yeah, what we're offering you on our side of the house is empathy, the ability to experience for 3 to 4 years the restraints that are keeping disenfranchised minorities from being able to participate in society.
Right. So you say there are certain restraints which keep people from acting in society. I'm explaining why those restraints become worse, because people become more aggressive in other areas, because in general you get less open discussion, they can't persuade them, and because they get less support in the university in and of itself, because people cannot stand up and support. So for all those reasons, the problem you're mentioning here probably why it gets worse. So fourth of all, you get general backlash. There are general certain movements which try to protect the most vulnerable. Those movements now become tied to anti-speech and become tied to safe spaces. That means that those movements become seen, especially by other people, as movements that try to violate the freedom of speech in many instances. Other people can then point to them as an example. Oh, this is part of the general liberal elite trying to silence us in many instances. What does that do? It only decreases support for movements that try to protect the most vulnerable because they can see as anti-free speech. Many people care about their right to free speech and therefore are less likely to support those movements who actually help the most vulnerable in many instances. Those movements can be incredibly helpful in terms of helping the most vulnerable and now get less support and therefore have less ability to do so. And yet the panel, this debate is a trade-off. It is a trade-off because the general role of the university needs to fulfill, and we say it does better on the other side of the house. But even if you believe the other thing is more important, for the 4 reasons I gave you, it only gets worse for the most vulnerable. Very happy to propose.
Vulnerable people in society, and we do think that is really important. But even what we are going to explain is, even people that might not be persuaded by things that happen in safe spaces, the discussion that arises in itself is inherently good and makes sure that people become more moderate and have better views in society. I'm going to explain a few things in my speech. Firstly, inclusiveness, why it's extremely important and neglected by Rob. Secondly, why extreme views such as, or my perceived extreme views from safe space movements about banning people, banning speakers, in itself create discussions that create more moderate views and a better society. First, few points of rebuttal. Fleur Sanzalami says knowledge is really important because we have to seek the truth. We completely reject the notion that you need things that are triggering for people in society, triggering for people in that classroom in order to teach them to think critically. I think there are a lot of alternatives that you have. We are very happy to have these alternatives. If they cannot explain why specifically these extreme niche ideas have to be put in practice, we don't think that is going to happen. Secondly, they say now you are triggered to understand why you hold a belief and now you are more critical. We think this is exactly the reason why we oppose. We think that the safe space movement explicitly made sure that people who might intuitively thought that safe spaces were a very bad idea, that you shouldn't have these triggering ideas, in itself made sure that other people had to think about that. They had to reassure these ideas, they had to understand that more fundamentally. I'm going to explain that in my speech. Secondly, they say a safe space becomes an echo chamber. Well, the thing is this. A safe space is not a feminist, extremely left-wing group, right? A safe space is a society, is a place in which you ban extremely triggering ideas, things that might be triggering, discussions about issues that are very offensive to specific people. We think that it doesn't mean that you have to agree on everything. We think that is a notion that is completely falling into those perhaps. So, inclusiveness, why it's important. We think that if you don't feel accepted because people mock your religion, because people mock your sexuality, because people mock the very love that you have for someone else, maybe because that's someone of your gender. We think if you do not feel accepted within a university, the entire idea, the entire goal of proposition about knowledge and acquiring life skills is going to be gone. That is not a small group, that is a very big group, because everyone maybe in this room has one specific thing where they disagree with other people, or where they have issues that they are insecure about. We think that it is extremely important that these people have the right to learn, that they have the right to go to college. We empirically see that people leave university because they have the feeling that they themselves are not accepted. We think that is extremely problematic. We think that also the notion that you have a guarantee from the university that they are going to back you no matter what. If someone makes a comment about your race or about your religion that is extremely offensive, you know that there are people who support you, you know that that happens. We think that in itself, it means that more people stay in university, that means that more people actually have an opportunity to learn and to get better grades and to finish and get a degree. We really, really like that. So then, secondly, why we think that it's untrue what they say about people becoming really, really, really aggressive and then and doing all kinds of horrible things to people simply because there are safe spaces. So why do we think that extreme views create more moderate views in the end? We think that in the Netherlands, there's a very interesting discussion currently going on in the debating circuit about equity, right? We think that's a very good example of what is happening right here. Some people who often go to IOTA tournaments are very, very normalized to the idea that there is an equity officer and someone who takes care of that. Other people don't have that. There is a very internal discussion about why it is good and whether or not it is freedom of speech that happens. Why do we think that ultimately equity officers are going to become a thing in the Netherlands, and why ultimately it's going to happen that these structures are normalized? I'm going to explain that. You have different kinds of people and different ways in which they're persuaded. Firstly, you have people who are interested and can be persuaded by knowledge. We think that these people are the majority of people in university for a few reasons. First of all, because they like to think critically, because that's why they are in university and they're good at that. Secondly, because they are young people, so they are more progressive. So the internalized structures are much less set in stone than when you're much older and much more conservative. Also, empirically, we see that young people are often more progressive. We think that if, for example, a speaker is bad, people are obviously going to say that it's a bad idea and that it harms their freedom of speech. We don't think that that is a problem. Why not? Because if people say that that is a very bad thing, then you have an entire platform that is created that doesn't happen under the rest of the house. Why is that? First of all, because now we create a reason to discuss whether or not that speaker is wrong or whether or not that speaker should have the right to speak. We think that the mere fact that you discuss it is already really good. You have a reason for that. Also, for example, things about gender identities that might have been difficult to talk about, we now create a direct reason to talk about that. They never do that. Secondly, because you now have an establishment backing you, maybe not just the university, but also the safe space movement. So you have an entire group of people that say, I agree with you, we are standing up for you. That means, first of all, because that is nice and good to feel that way, but secondly, also because it's easier to see who else supports you. To talk to other people, to say, I actually agree with that, and it's much easier to see and to know what kind of views exist and who you can group up with. But secondly, if you are uncomfortable with explaining why something is offensive to you and why something is extremely horrible, you now have an establishment that does that for you, so you don't have to do that. So we think that there are a lot of people that are going to hear a lot of reasons about taboos and issues that we usually don't talk about in society, maybe for the first time and are genuinely persuaded. We think that that is extremely important. That means, even if they are not persuaded, we think that people who are persuaded, a wrinkle effect is created, that they talk to other people, that they have to constantly explain why they actually agree with the safe space movement. Empirically, this is happening, we would like to say, first half.
So, Lisa, do you think there's something like an objective truth?
In some cases, yes, but we think that it's very important to acknowledge like pain and stuff. We think that it's more important than a philosophical discussion about other issues. So we think that a good example of this is, for example, the Free the Nipple movement, where a lot of people, for example, based on their gut feel, based on the normalized structures in their brain, thought that it was very weird of women to have breastfeed in public. When the Free the Nipple movement came, they were on the internet and naked breasts were everywhere. There was a massive and very big group of people that opposed that. What happened was other people were explaining that. They said this is actually because liking boobs is a fetish and you sexualize women and that should not be their burden. We think that not everyone was persuaded by that. We do think that other people were persuaded by that. That doesn't mean that now everyone who heard that story is going to like women walking around with their bare breasts, but that does mean that they are now much more prone to accepting the more moderate view, namely women should be able to breastfeed in public. We think that in a lot of instances, an extreme view and talking about an extreme view creates more prone to moderate ideas. We think that therefore, ultimately, this is going to create a much more inclusive and much better life skill environment for people who have issues, and also that a bigger society is going to be created because we like that. Vote opposition.
that claims that the good fight has been fought in universities. We reject the characterization of proposition that universities are liberal places where people are likely to stand up when offensive things are being said. We think there are many instances where offensive things are being said and the community around you doesn't act as you would like to. We think that safe space movements that then do everything in their power to keep the environment around you inclusive is something that is a dire necessity. It is not anti-liberal whims. We think this is something that is necessary to make university accessible for people who belong to minorities, but we think it is not the kind of thing that they try to portray in which we infringe upon your education. We think that perhaps it is 3 years of your life that you spend in university. Those are the 3 most formative years of your life in which you're prepared to tackle the world around you. If you're not able to attend university because you don't feel welcome, we think that is a shame. That is something we need to protect. In my speech, I'm going to be talking about 2 things. First of all, I'm going to be talking about education and the marketplace of ideas, why we think it isn't harmed, why we think it is something that we're actually protecting under our side of the house. Second of all, I'm going to be talking about how we are the side that champion both tolerance and inclusiveness in universities, why we stand up for minorities. Before I do that, I want to characterize the kind of speaker and content that is often shut out by the safe space movement. Because we think that the kind of speaker and content that is often shut out by these movements isn't just excluding these things on the basis because they are anti-liberal. We think that often there are speakers that are able to say lots of things that don't necessarily agree with many liberal people, but often what these movements do is they exclude speakers on the basis of things they have said before that were very offensive, about the context that they belong to, that there is a real risk that there will be actually very nasty things said at rallies, at these events. Let me give you an example. Emma talks about bathrooms being used by different genders. We think that it is likely that people who have said transphobic things in the past would not be invited to speak out on the issue. We think that that is completely fine. We think that you as a trans person would be very much offended if that person spoke at your university and was clapped at, was lauded because they're such a good academic. We think that that doesn't make you comfortable to speak out. We think conversely, the kind of people that would be allowed to speak by these social movements would likely be people who stand up, for example, for victims of sexual assault. We think that these speakers wouldn't be shut out because they have a nuanced argument to make that is unlikely to offend many people. Then Emma says, well, what's triggering anyway? We think that, to a certain extent, that is arbitrary. But we think that there are speakers who have a certain track record of offending people every single time they speak out, ladies and gentlemen. The people who are shut out are people which we can be very certain that minorities are going to be harmed. Those are the people that we're excluding from our platforms. I'm going to be talking about why this exclusion doesn't hurt education in the way that government claims. Let's talk about 3 things. First of all, we think that often an alternative is offered. It isn't just that these movements say, you're not speaking at our event. Often what they're doing is that they try to replace that speaker by a more nuanced speaker. Often what they try to do is find secondary literature on this topic that maybe isn't that graphic and maybe isn't that offensive. We think that the idea, for example, that abortion is an attack on life, is an idea that can be read in university. It isn't one that calls a woman who chooses to do so a murderer. We think that there is a categorical distinction, and what often these movements do is exclude the latter and try to replace it with the former. That is the first. So we think that lots of ideas are still being taught in universities. That is the thing that we do. Second of all, talking about a bit of epistemology, right? We don't know what's true. We think that that is indeed the case. I already proved to you why lots of these ideas are already being challenged. We don't necessarily understand why you would have to do it in such an offensive way. Conversely, we don't think that this extra offense is going to do anything else, right? Especially if the target audience is supposedly so liberal, they wouldn't be necessarily swayed by very transphobic comments, right? It is probably the content itself of the idea that would be so important that is still being offered. And then we think that, this is not a debate about shutting out a speaker or shutting out no one. We think that on either side of the house, people are going to be shut out. We think on their side of the house, many trans people, many people of minorities won't feel comfortable expressing that. We think that if there is an event, if there is a platform in which there is a guest speaker who is lauded for their academic accomplishments or whatever, these people are going to be lauded. These people are going to have to speak out, and you as a minority are very unlikely to feel in the position to actually counter that. We think it is empirically not true that people in the audience are going to counter and are going to stand so much to back you. We think that often the people who speak are respected academics. We conversely think that it is very likely that you won't feel in the position to do that. Also because it's kind of awkward, right? If there is such a huge room of people and there's a speaker, we think it's unlikely that there are many people who are going to stand out. So the offense has happened and they can only hope that someone is going to speak out. That is also my second clash, why we champion tolerance and inclusiveness. We think that the most important thing here is that people actually feel included in their university community. They say in their first argument that we need to make sure, so they say that they make sure that other students become angrier at the point that you shut out guest speakers, while otherwise, if we wouldn't have banned them, they would have come out in support. Two reactions. First of all, we think it's unlikely that things for minorities are actually going to get worse as a result of these movements shutting out certain people. We think that if their characterization is true, and people are liberal in universities, then they're not going to backlash against the minority, right? The idea of homosexuals being accepted or trans people being accepted is a very deep-rooted belief in liberal people, right? We think that at most they're going to backlash against the safe space movement. We think that we don't necessarily need to care about that, right? As long as these people are offered the safest possible way to live their life, we're fine with that. However, if the community is more conservative, we think that exactly we need this kind of social movement, right? If there is many people in the audience who are going to nod, who are going to agree with the speaker who's going to say offensive things, then probably it's a very good idea to shut out those kinds of people, to not show these minorities that there is so much support, because that is exactly what causes people not to feel comfortable in an aula and to leave university. We think, second of all, we think that the comparative is this. What they can best do is that people might come out in support when a speaker says something really offensive. Under our side of the house, we're shutting out that very possibility. We think under our side, we've given people the guarantee that the place where they spend most of their time in their most formative years isn't one where they're being categorically discriminated or offended. We think that that is important. After all, we think it is a necessity for you to feel accepted. Under our side of the house, we offer you the certainty that there is a movement that is going to ensure that. Under their side of the house, we can only dream of it. Because of that, please oppose.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition and all the speakers in the top half, and I welcome Member of Government.
Many people here talked about him today, but no one mentioned him by name. John Stuart Mill said three things. He said that when you meet someone and you switch opinions, you can find out that he's right and you are wrong, and then you can change your mind. You can find out that the truth is somewhere between the two of you, and you can integrate your opinions. And you can find out that he's wrong and you are right. You can try to convince him, but you found better answers for yourself. What do we mean by that? We mean that Stuart John Mill was by the side of engagement. And in this debate, when we face sanctions against someone else, exclusion of someone else, or engagement, trying to mitigate opinions, trying to find the common truth, trying to find real influence between in conservative audience, we are in the side of engagement. We're going to do two things in this debate. We're going to show you how we are losing mass influence between conservative circles and how we can actually, by this exclusion of safe places, we are creating a social perception that says that safe spaces are only existing in universities and are disconnected from what should coexist in society. Second of all, we're going to tell you how these safe spaces turn to feed themselves and creating cycles that create a perception by society that universities are becoming more absurd and more detaching from their life, and therefore universities losing a very important fight in influencing in our societies. Before that, a few points of rebuttal. Now note, the first notion that we are getting from opening opposition is that we should not ever invite anyone, we should just explain them, this and this and this and this is a taboo. Now, first of all, we do not understand why you can't have the speaker there talking and then discuss about what he says and then decide if it's a taboo. Moreover, we do not see why they think that they have the power to decide in advance for everyone within universities what is a taboo. Second point of rebuttal. They are telling us that by the comparative, ultimately, weaker parts of society and weaker parts within university are going to be silenced. Two answers to this. First of all, this is factually not true. Weaker parts within universities before safe places or existed managed to fight and advocate for themselves. This is, by comparative, not true. Second of all, we are answering that by the comparative of this debate, we much rather to see much safe spaces to everyone within the general society. Much more acceptance within society, they're creating a perception that the stuff only exists in universities. And if that means that some people may feel uncomfortable sometimes within universities, this is a price we are willing to pay. Why? Because in universities is a place when you are coming, when you put your shields down. This is a place when you subscribe to. You are by definition saying that you are willing to hear other opinions and other stuff that are going on within society, and to create a better situation for everyone within society, then we stand by the side of it. Third point of rebuttal. They are talking about inclusiveness and inclusivity, but they are ignoring the fact that de facto they are not including within society many people that can actually be part of this. Why is that true? We're going to go to our first point. I'm very sorry that you never gave us a POI and a chance to engage with you in advance. Note, a lot of people are attending universities that are coming from conservative conservative ideas. They never heard about liberal ideas before. The first time they are being exposed to such opinions are within universities. What are the problems that safe spaces create within this context? If I feel that the ideas that I'm getting within the university that are detached from the professional method that I'm getting is detached from my life. Why is that? Because no one who represents opinion that I used to have is being invited to speak. Because no one who stands for things that people in my place of birth believe, that no one stands for stuff like this, I feel that this stuff can only exist here. Why is that true? Because when I don't hear real engagement between those opinions, when I don't hear real answers to the ideas that I used to have before, I tend to believe that I cannot imply the stuff that I'm studying here in my life. What is the concrete impact and damage that we see on this case? It means that people are leaving universities without the proper ability and knowledge to actually use the knowledge and use liberal and use more moderate ideas within the place that they live. What is the comparative, that important comparative that we give you in this debate under our model in closing government? We are saying that for action society to improve its acceptance to legal parts of society, for example, for North Carolina to actually legislate laws that are accepting transgenders in their society, they have to have audience that are willing to support this. They have to have audience that believe that transgenders does not exist only in universities, but actually exist in North Carolina. They have to have audience that are actually willing to back this up. It will never happen if people will not leave universities coming back from North Carolina when they actually have the knowledge and they actually think that they can implement that in their place of birth. That means that in the long term, we are actually planting seeds on our side of the house, planting seeds in people that can later on spread within society, creating much more moderation in this place, and we are gaining much more influence on conservatives like this. Yes, are you laughing? Closing?
Right, yeah, so we're saying that safe spaces allow disenfranchised minorities from closed communities to enter academia, which they would not have done so otherwise for fear of not being accepted.
That's true, but if you go much more backwards, you will see that the reason why they are feeling disconnected from academia is because social conventions. We are saying that social conventions will never change unless people will change them, unless people will be influenced within universities and change social conventions. What you are creating is simply just a place, a sanctuary place, when they can hide out from society. We would like them to feel comfortable within society. We are on the side of the inclusivity, and this is how we get it. Second point, note. And I'm going to be very careful about this. But sometimes, echo chambers tends to feed themselves. How this is happening? There is somewhat of an addictive feeling to be moral superior. What does it mean? It means that when you are taking a stand of moral superiority, convincing yourself that you are moral superior on any other opinion because you are no longer engaging with those other opinions, it means that you are more likely to trench in within your own opinions. What is this concept? It means that you are more likely to take on more and more stuff from the opposing side to you and object to them, and object to them, and object to them. You are more likely to be seen more disconnected from society. Why is this harmful? Because universities are the place where revolutions happen. Universities are the place that before safe spaces brought us the feminist revolution, for example. University is the place of freedom. What does it mean? That in order to actually have this effect on society, in order to actually bring this breakthrough to society, universities has to have a connection to society. And the more society will perceive on universities as places of people who deem themselves as moral superior on all of us, detaching from ourselves, we are less likely to actually accept the ideas and accept the breakthrough. Meaning that universities actually have a moral duty to society to remain a place when an honest discourses happen, when actually ideas prevail and actual revolutions gain to society. What do we bring into this debate? We are telling you that in our side of the house, we actually can gain more access to conservatives and more changes within society in the benefit of everyone. Second of all, we are telling you we have a moral obligation to bring breakthroughs to society and to bring a much better world for everyone. Thank you very much.
is not to affect everything around our world. It's to give the people who come and study there the tools that they need to progress themselves later in life. We think it's most important to give these tools to minorities and disenfranchised groups within society, and we think that safe spaces allow us to do this like nothing else does. My first point will be about the objectives of academia and why we don't think safe spaces are hurting them. And the second will be why we think that the most important thing in this debate is whether we're giving minorities the possibility of taking part in academic studies. Some about it first. So we heard that we are going to scare away conservatives because they don't hear the opinions that they agree with, right? But we're not talking about shutting out right-wing opinions. We're talking about not having extremely racist ideas. We're talking about not having very graphic descriptions of types of assault. We're talking about things that are not shutting out opinions completely, but not saying them in a way that it's going to deeply hurt other people. So we don't think it's likely that someone who's right-wing will leave academia because you didn't explain his opinions extremely enough or graphically enough, but it is likely that someone will leave academia or not do as well in academia because people do speak about these things graphically or portray very extremely racist ideologies. Right? Now we heard that this point about moral superiority, which basically means that academia needs to be a place which is morally superior and affects society. Right? Now we just don't think that's the main job of academia. We think that what academia does is, first of all, teaching people the basic tools that they need to progress in life in the teaching degrees, and also research. Right? Now we think that even if academia in some way is supposed to affect society, and this is what it has done throughout history, then it has always done that as part of an ivory tower. People have always viewed academia as something which is detached from the rest of society, and if it has been able to affect society in the past, in fact of that not being its main goal, then it will be able to do that in the future as well. So, what do we think are the objectives of academia? Right, so we heard from a government side that academia needs to affect society and needs to give you knowledge. Well, we think that this isn't exactly the goal of academia. So first of all, we'll differentiate between two different things that academia does. The first is the teaching of students to come to get a BA or MA, and the second is the research that goes on in higher degrees, right? So about teaching, right? We think that the goal of teaching is to give people the tools that they need to progress later in life. Now to give these tools, that means giving tools of things which are more graphic and more extreme and can be helpful to minorities can do it in the research later using these tools, but without hurting the people in the primary studies. Right, so we don't think we are harming the goals of academia as they are. Before we explain why we're helping minorities and why we think this is the most important thing, I will take the first government.
A lot of things we now see as true were things that were used to be seen as very offensive. Why do you think the safe space community has the ability to predict where social norms will go and how they will lead us?
Right, so we predict how social norms will go. They need to understand today we have minorities who are suffering from very specific trends in academia. We have very specific groups that are suffering from reading racist things about their ethnicity or certain opinions about their religious beliefs or certain graphic descriptions of certain experiences that they had in the past. You can understand that these are the types of things that in actuality today are hurting people from being in academia and from succeeding there. These are the kinds of things that safe spaces tend to keep out. So we don't need to predict the norms because we don't think that academia needs to shape society in the future. We think it needs to deal with the problems today and give people the tools that they need to progress later in life as its main goal within safe spaces. Right? So we think that if we talk about teaching in academia, which is the main thing that safe spaces affect. So we think that people coming from empowered communities are very likely to be in university and finish it anyway and get the tools that they need to progress later in life anyways, because it's likely that other people from the community have been in, more of them have been in academia in the past and have finished in the past, and they have that example, because they tend to be more confident in themselves as a result of that, and because they're expected by all their environment to succeed, while people coming from weaker backgrounds sometimes have less support, right? So we see that many people from minorities or disenfranchised groups come to academia, but either find it very hard to fit in within the norms of the academic community and live, or they stay there but they don't have the same achievements that other people who come from other backgrounds have. Right? Now, we think that what safe spaces are doing is, first of all, just making them feel safer, as we already heard, but it's also just the matter of sending them a message that we care about you. Academia finds you important, although you are usually disenfranchised within the academic community. Usually you find it hard to fit within the academic community. We are going to do that extra effort for you so you can fit in and feel better, right? So we think that just by that message, we are making them less likely to leave the academic settings and be more likely to succeed in it, right? Now we think that specifically for these communities, it's very important that they stay in academia and have good achievements, because it means that society views them better when they finish their academic studies, because it means they have more job prospects, because in academia you create professional connections that you have later in your career, and because they give you the critical tools that you need for your professions later in life. Right? Now we think that while stronger populations are likely to get all of these things anyways, specifically these minorities are not likely to get them under the status quo, and safe spaces do make a small step towards improving that in the future, right? So we think that the main goal of academia, of the studies in academia, which is what safe spaces usually affect, is to give people tools to progress later in life. We think it's likely that empowered groups are going to achieve this goal, regardless of whether we have safe spaces or not, and we think that we are helping the people who are with us in society today to achieve these goals in spite of the built-in weakness that they have within the academic circumstances. So for these reasons, we think we should not regret the existence of safe spaces in academia. Thank you.
Two clashes from government summation in this debate. First being inclusivity, or inclusiveness, I'm not sure how to say this word actually, and second being the effects that this is going to have on the discourse and therefore from the discourse to actual society. Before that, just 2 points of rebuttal that didn't fit in. The rest is going to be incorporated inside. So firstly, we are hearing that, come on, guys, we're not actually pushing the conservatives outside of the universities. It's unlikely. To which we say, when a Facebook that I considered someone that I adore, his invitation has been cancelled to speak at my university, what is sure to happen is that I feel very frustrated. The way that I shall respond to which is some people, yes, might actually take their stuff and leave the university because they feel unwelcome. A lot like all of the analysis that we hear from on how the vulnerable students might feel if they do hear it. Secondly, even if I won't leave the university, then a lot of people won't sign up for the university to begin with because they see the universities as such echo chambers. Thirdly, we say that even if not, and even if I stay in the university, I will shut down. I will never voice my opinions. I will just be too afraid to be scolded that I will just say, okay, I need to pass the 3-4 years as a conservative student, covert conservative students, and then go back to the place that I know. We say that this is very bad, and I'll touch upon that on my question. Second point of rebuttal, so we hear again about the entire inclusivity point and about how we are sending a pacifying message, and I will answer these directly in the clashes, but pay attention, note that we are not getting any clear response to Pini on the escalation of the PC culture, on and the pernicious effects that this has. More on that later. Let's move into the first clash. So inclusivity. So start up with this, and they say, listen, the most vulnerable students are going to quit universities, and we are obliged to give them a chance to go through this experience. To which we asked, if we would have had the chance, we would have asked them, and what might happen under your side of the house to the ultra-conservative or even conservative students that will not feel welcome there. Now, what we tell you on inclusivity, and why do we actually care a bit more about the conservative students in this debate, is, well, of course it's hugely important to include everyone that we can. We're not saying that it's not important to include the vulnerable populations, but we are more worried that the conservatives might actually take their stuff and leave or not come to begin with. Why is that? Because we say that, first of all, it's very likely that for every such speaker that comes and says offensive things, there will be a massive cry out. There will be some support that these students can have. As Pini tells you, we have seen that before that such safe spaces even existed, there wasn't a real problem to such populations to actually get accepted into universities, so we're not sure what you guys are talking about. We say that the same does not exist for conservative students. They are going into an institution that to begin with is considered like an elitist institution, elitist liberal institution, and they are suspicious from the moment that they step in there. They keep having to tell themselves, I can make it here, I have a place here. The more that we signal to them, no, you know what, actually your opinions and your values are not welcome here, then we say that it's far more likely that they will give up. Why do we care about them not giving up? For all of the reasons that you heard from OG, because we actually do believe that that we need a discourse, and basically OO agrees with this. We need a discourse, and we need both sides to actually engage one another in order to progress as a society. No. Now, it's important to understand, and let's just insert that here, that conservative people are not bad people. They are people that have been pampered with an ideology since the moment that they were born, that those liberals are a threat to their values, are a threat to family values, or to national values, and we believe that they are scared. They are just as scared sometimes as some of the populations that the government wants to actually protect in this debate, and we think that we are allowed to protect these ideas as well. Moving on to the effects that we hear on the discourse. Before that, yes, I'll take it.
We have explained that discussions as a result of speakers banned, even if it is perceived as extreme attempt, will create a much better platform for understanding than you ever can when you shut up minority voices.
Okay, so if I understand this point correctly, it sounds to me just like government point in this debate, because what OO is telling you is that basically when we are saying something is prohibited, then we are raising a discourse on it. And now this is a taboo, and now people will start discussing upon this. But what they are assuming is that this will actually continue to last. We say that maybe one speaker will be banned once, then a second speaker will be banned twice, and then no more speakers will actually try and even attempt to get into to speak in that university. So in a very short while, you just get echo chambers that are nobody even attempts to meddle with and to actually put some different ideologies in. So if your point is right and you want to create discourse and you want people to actually engage with one another, then of course that the best situation here would be to allow everyone to speak, to allow people to react to those speeches post they have happened. And we get all the good effects that they want. So what OG basically tells us here is that people get fixated on their liberal agendas, and therefore this creates dogmatism and something philosophical about relative truth, not sure. What OO tells you, I've already reacted to. What we tell you are two things in this respect. A, we tell you that once we allow students of all kinds to feel included, then, and this is because we just simply don't censor anyone, then we allow conservative students to take part in this, and we believe that this will be a way to actually persuade them. We believe that we don't have to persuade anybody. Of course, we're not going to persuade everyone. We're saying that once we get to some people, they come home and they bring it to the dinner table, and then these ideas spread. They tell their little conservative brothers and sisters to go to the university, and then they get exposed to these ideas. And we say that on the long run, this helps the very vulnerable populations a lot more. Secondly, we give you this idea of escalation of moral superiority. We don't hear a response to this. We say that once we have took upon ourselves a PC culture, there's something addictive about it, because I feel superior, because I stand up against something, and I feel very good about myself. And we say that this tends to escalate. Why? Because if everyone agrees about everything, then I need to find something new to be against. Then I need, and at that moment, we will reach a state where universities in Canada are actually banning yoga lessons because they are appropriating Asian cultures or whatnot, and we say that we don't know what's next, maybe coffee, but why is that so bad? We say that this keeps banning more and more people from the discourse. This creates the image that universities are an elitist, detached institution, and that liberal agendas as a whole is something that is preposterous. For all of these reasons, we beg you to propose them.
Second government's problem is that the universities are considered to be very left-wing and disconnected from society. That is a problem we do not aim to solve. That is something that we believe will happen anyway. What we offer you on our side of the house is inclusiveness in those universities of more minorities who would not have reached those universities in another way, who would not have been able to get the tools they need to integrate into society, and therefore we are offering you a unique impact on our side of the house, while they offer you the same people that would have been offended in the status quo being offended when they are facing safe spaces. We don't see the impact. Like 5 points of rebuttal and then 2 clashes. First, minorities, where is it better for them? And first of all, why are they important? And second of all, why are we talking about academia? So they tell us again that like conservative people will not go to universities anyway, to which we say, fine, that is true whether there are safe spaces or not, because if the very notion of a disconnected institution is what deters them from coming to the university and getting all those great tools, then they will not come to the university anyway, and we don't get anything extra, and we're fine with them pursuing education in different means. Netta shows you that we have a unique group of minorities from close communities who would not have been able to get to the university in another way if we do not show them that we are inclusive of their own opinions, of their identities, and we are not challenging them the way the rest of society may be willing to do. They tell us that if they come to the university, those conservative people will be afraid and shut up. To which we say they still get the tools to integrate into society, we're fine with that, they can express their opinions on Facebook. They say they tell us that this has not deterred minorities from the universities before. To which we say, first of all, ever since the safe space movement started gaining momentum, there have been more and more people from those minorities getting into academia. Call that correlation, but we want to point that in our private noise. And Netta has analyzed to you why those minorities, why the rest of those people who have not come to academia so far, are basically feel threatened by the very concept of academia, by the very concept of not being accepted, that the rest of society might not accept them. And therefore, we believe that we are getting a unique impact on our side. They say that academia's job is to create discourse that promotes society, to which we say, why academia? Let's promote society on Facebook. Let's get those speakers to express their opinions on TED Talks. We never heard from either side of the house, this side of the house, I forget what they are, so many other avenues for promoting my opinions. Let's talk, though, about minorities. So first house, talk about where minorities have it better off. But there is an implicit assumption that goes unanswered in this debate until Netta gets up, which is why should academia and the safe space, why should the academic arena care about minorities in the first place if our point is to talk about research? Netta offers you that in saying that academia is a unique point for certain people to integrate into society by offering them tools to operate in society afterwards, by offering them theories in law and economics, in anything that they will not have received in enclave communities. Once you deter those people from academia, that is a problem. Why? Because you get less functioning members of society, you get less talents for future research, which will promote academia itself, and basically you get a lot less diversity because you get a lot less opinions expressed. Netta explains to you why we care about minorities in the first place. That's allowing first oppositions, benefits to minorities to even stand in this debate. So we believe that is very important. And Netta also explains to you why those enclave minorities are the most important. Because those are the ones who take that knowledge back home to their communities and say, you know what, there is an aspect in this society that doesn't hate us after all. There is an aspect in secular society that is not hateful of Orthodox Jewish communities. There is an aspect of society that accepts me for who I am and is willing to accommodate that. There is an aspect of society that is willing to show empathy to me. Here enters RPRI from the beginning of the debate. That is exactly what we're offering you. Academia is a unique point of integration of people into society. That is why we are committed to minorities. And moreover, governments, right? Yeah, point about the fact that we don't know the objective truth about safe spaces is irrelevant. Why? Because the point is the message we are sending to these minorities. Whether or not we succeed is less relevant. The point is that we try, and we send them a message that we are trying and willing to try for them. That is what we believe is important in this debate first.
Flores and I explain why it gets worse for vulnerable people when they are seen as anti-freedom and they can no longer speak about their experience at university. Safe spaces cannot last forever. What are you going to do to protect minorities on the long term?
Right. So if your point is the fact that safe spaces are just not reflective of society at large, I don't think that's a burden we need to take in this debate. We are offering a point of integration. We are offering an initial point wherein those people can be exposed to society in a safe environment and say, okay, let's weigh the benefits and the costs. Let's see whether or not I want to integrate, considering that society is what it is. University is a transition space into society, both for young people at large and also for those disenfranchised minorities who would not have been accessible to society otherwise. Let's talk about the role of academia. Sure, second.
It is because universities are considered so liberal that we realize that conservative students are reasonable people willing to listen. This is exactly why we care so much about protecting them.
Fine. You never explained to us why it is so, okay, the conservative students you deter from coming to the university are those who would have hated universities anyway because they're already considered left-wing and ivory tower. Those people can come to the university, get annoyed at safe space for all I care, post about it on Facebook for all I care, but still engage in society, and they can choose to do so, and they have every single option to do so. What Netta gives you is a unique group that doesn't have any other option, that we are offering their options that they did not have under government side of the house. Let's talk about the goal of academia, though. So first, government tells us, well, research, and this interrupts research. Now, first opposition tell you that we can have research even with the safe spaces. Now, if government do show an impact on academia, that sort of weakens opposition side of the house, right? Because you could advocate for safe spaces elsewhere, not necessarily in academia. Netta comes and solves this problem by telling you that what we get on our side, by promoting those disenfranchised minorities, by creating a space where everybody is accepted, is first of all, better researchers, and also she shows you in detail why it is definitely possible to conduct research. Thus expanding on first opposition's one sentence explanation. It is because we separate research from studies. It is because we can hold research in a disconnected environment from the tools that we give our students. And that is why we want to give our students the most neutral tools, the most accepting tools possible, that will allow them to choose whether or not they want to integrate into society after that. So basically, what we're telling you, and the second government tell us, well, we have a moral obligation to challenge the discourse, to which we say, first of all, we definitely accept the point of research, we don't see the discrepancy in goals, but even if that is the case, and on our side of the house, we get spreading knowledge to more people, we get discourse from more people, while you guys get the academia staying left-wing, staying disconnected, staying irrelevant. We get integration, and we get discourse.